Hello, and welcome to another episode of
the Super Data Brothers Super Show.
That's right. I am Ryan.
And I am Eric.
And we are two real-life brothers who work in the data and analytics industry. And have we got a good one for you today, folks?
Boy, do we, Ryan. You know, I'm so excited for today's show for a number of reasons. One, we're talking to friend of the show, Matt Housley. That's always a good time. Two, we're talking about the Salesforce buying Informatica and also why tech acquisitions fail. And will Informatica being bought by Salesforce fail? Has Informatica already pre-failed? I don't know. We'll see. And also we'll be exploring something called Quizma charts. I haven't looked into this at all, but Ryan has a bit. And I think it's like an AI chart creating tool, just like a real small thing, but it looked pretty interesting.
Yep, we'll take a look at that towards the tail end of the show. So that's what we have on deck today. Now, folks, if this is your first time watching the Super Data Brothers show, this is a live show, which means if you get your questions and comments and reactions into the chat, we will read them in real time and give our opinion, and Matt will give his opinion about anything. So, whatever it is, get it into the chat. We'll read it. Also, as always, if you let us know where you're watching from, we will give you a live shout out at that time. So without further ado, why don't we welcome Matt to the stage and get rolling here. Tom says hello from Chicago. Tom, good to have you here. Tom is one of our regulars, and when we don't talk about data, Tom and I mostly talk about Legos. Tom and I are Lego guys, big time. All right, Matt, welcome to the Super Data Brothers show.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, it's good to have you back. So, big news in the data world this week as Salesforce acquires Informatica. Of course, Informatica, maybe not the newest data movement and transformation tool, but certainly one of the bigger ones. We wanted to have you on to help set the context of this acquisition for us and help people figure out what it might mean. So we will dive into that. We got a couple more shout outs to do first, though. Kevin Ducat watching from Madison, Wisconsin. Kevin, so fun story. Kevin was an Informatica developer back in 2010 on the team where I started my career as a Cognos developer.
Got it. Okay.
So Kevin and I, we go way back, and Kevin I know has a lot of Informatica experience.
Yeah, Kevin, drop your hot takes in the comments. I want to hear your perspective on this.
Yeah. Let us know when we're way off target here.
Yes,
and then, we've got Cesare, maybe. Watching from Warsaw. Apologize if I butchered your name there. But tuning in from Poland, good to have you. And then this LinkedIn user is going to be Philip Schumacher, tuning in from Germany. So we have a very international audience here on the Super Data Brothers show.
Nice.
All right. So Matt, why don't you set the stage for us? What was your first thought when you saw it come across the news wire that Salesforce had acquired Informatica?
Okay, so when I think about Salesforce, I think a lot about how Salesforce gets into companies. And here's how it works. Basically, the head of sales says, hey, my people really like Salesforce because they used it at their previous jobs, or I used it at my previous job. And that's always Salesforce's door into a company, basically. And in a LinkedIn discussion, I mentioned this actually, that Salesforce is even in Google, right? You would expect Google would just build all this stuff in-house, but no, they also have Salesforce. And so I think what makes this acquisition potentially interesting is that Salesforce they're not a general purpose data company at this point, right? Like they're not, you don't think of them in terms of, they're not a data warehousing company, anything like this, but they do have this beachhead where potentially they could expand into a lot of data applications by first, getting in through the sales team, then telling the sales team, hey, we have this data transformation tool. It's built in now, and it will help you to do some processing and analytics, basic stuff, and we can transport the data into your data warehouse. And then pretty soon, that expands out into a bigger footprint in the company. That's an ideal scenario. But I think if I'm running Salesforce, this is how I'm thinking about things, that I have such a big footprint in corporate America, in global enterprises, that potentially I could do something interesting with Informatica.
Do you think, does this mark a how do I phrase this? It seems like Salesforce, maybe this could be a sign that they're transitioning into more of a technology and portfolio company than strictly kind of a CRM and sales company. And, if you look at the earlier acquisitions, particularly Tableau, I think you can see that maybe that's the play here. So one of the things I've heard tossed around is Salesforce is becoming more like IBM. And do you think that
Oracle would be another example, right? Yeah. I think that's really
do we want
possible.
that?
Well,
like
I'm not
IBM
saying
and
we
Oracle,
want it.
is that a good thing?
Maybe if you're an investor.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, I think Salesforce, anytime it's like being a consultant and having a whale client, right? Like, you don't want to be stuck in one lane where potentially some new upstart competitor comes along and eats your lunch. And so I have to imagine that if you're running this, you're thinking about, okay, how can I diversify my portfolio of offerings to customers, and how can I get into more areas? And I imagine IBM once upon a time was thinking the same thing, right? Like, they saw the decline of the mainframe coming, their PC business blew up at some point. So we need to keep expanding into other areas to keep ourselves relevant. And not that Salesforce, their core product, is under immediate threat, but if you're looking down the road, you think about, okay, how can we build a broader customer base? And also, I wonder if they won't use Informatica to get their core product into companies as well, to come in and say, oh, we can offer both of these things. I mean, Microsoft has done that quite a bit, right? Like, if you know about how the Microsoft Windows business works, part of the reason so many companies are on Windows is that a company like Dell will come in and offer both servers and laptops as part of a huge contract, and then Microsoft comes in parallel and offers licenses to everything. You've got your desktop licenses, you've got your server licenses, they probably bring Azure in as well. And again, I have to imagine that Salesforce kind of eyes that business and says, can we do something similar to that?
Yeah, we've definitely seen that in the BI space. Power BI in the last 5 years or so has eaten the BI space alive.
Yeah.
And it's because of their ability to go in and position the BI tool. Hey, it's basically free.
You're already paying for it.
For some definitions of free.
Yes.
So we might see a similar thing here with Salesforce. I will say the initial reaction I saw from a lot of our peers, and we're both kind of more in the startup, tech bro scene, was bewilderment, and then kind of, why would anybody buy Informatica? Who even uses Informatica?
Right.
Was a major part of the reaction. Can you tell people, like, who does use Informatica?
I mean, I see it all over the place, honestly. Like, enterprises use Informatica, right? And that is the thing to keep in mind, that startups think they have deep pockets. And yes, they raise a lot of money, especially if they're in AI these days. But enterprises have like just piles of money, and they buy things like Informatica and Salesforce more than startups. Let's say that.
Yeah. Yes. And that's, if you were to say, it's like any technology.
Right.
There's what's cool, and really the startup scene in a lot of ways is like, when I was a major hipster in 2011, right?
Right.
Like, it's cool, and you think you're the center of the world, but in reality, if you were to look at just transactions processed on Informatica versus a really well-known tool like Fivetran, I would guess Informatica is moving orders of magnitude more data than Fivetran is, would be my estimate. And that's the type of thing in the startup world people would, they just dismiss out of hand that someone would want to use Informatica.
Right.
But I would guess most of the largest companies in the world probably have some Informatica footprint.
Right. And it's not just data volume, right? It's like quote unquote data value. So in other words, what company are you attached to and how much revenue do they have? Even if it's a small volume of data, but you're attached to like a $10 billion a year revenue company, and you're attached to a lot of those, actually, that data has a lot of value. Like the CEOs in those companies care about that data showing up consistently, and they don't particularly want to hear a pitch for a new tool to do something different because they're like, well, this is working. Why would I mess with this?
Yeah, Kevin says here there were reports last year that this deal was on the table, so it's not surprising that it happened this year. Do you have anything to say about the timing? Why do you think now is the time to do it?
I mean, I haven't really dug into the financials of the deal, except I know it was less money. I wonder if, I mean, do we know that Informatica was under any kind of distress? Because that's often what brings these deals about. It's like maybe not immediate financial distress, but if they kind of see the writing on the wall, they're struggling in certain areas, and they're like, okay, we would be better off as part of a larger company with a bigger portfolio, with deeper pockets that maybe they can fund R&D as well, where we're not quite in a position to do that right now. And the classic example I cite of this is Oracle acquiring Sun back in 2010. Long time ago, Sun was like one of the darlings of the dot-com boom, and then they also went down with a bust. At one point, they were worth like $200 billion, and then they were acquired 10 years later for like $7 billion by Oracle. And so I wonder if this is partially maybe some long-term pressures coming about, where Informatica had to come back to the table and sign on for less money because they just think this is the time to do it, and it's going to get worse over time.
Yeah, that's possible. I want to talk about the kind of the business angle here and compare that with the technology angle and how they may differ. But before we do, I have to give a shout out to this season's sponsor of the Super Data Brothers show, Good Data. So Good Data is underwriting all of season 3. If you've been watching us, you know that. And very exciting. Good Data is launching Good Data AI today. So Good Data AI is an AI tool that can answer questions in natural language, can build visualizations in natural language. And there's some things that Good Data AI does in the BI space that I think are pretty unique and really powerful. You know, for example, Good Data AI is scoped to the entire metadata model. So if you look in BI, it's very common that the natural language interface is only able to interact with a single dashboard, and it can't reference data points outside of that dashboard. That's not true with Good Data. If you have a metadata model that's got 150 tables and you're looking at a dashboard and you need to pull in a data point from a table that's not available locally, it can go to the full metadata model and pull in that data. So it's not scoped to an individual dashboard. Now, there's also a big focus on analytics as code integration. This is an open natural language query interface where you can take the NLQ interface out of Good Data and embed it into your own custom applications, or interact with it directly via API integration. So you can build a fully custom front end, and if you want to have an analytics NLQ experience in that fully custom front end, Good Data can provide that. So all of this is available today. If you go to gooddata.com and check it out, sign up for a trial, you will get access to Good Data AI. I can tell you, as someone with a little insider information, that we're working on some really exciting things coming up. I would expect, by the end of the first half of this year, we'll be launching the Good Data MCP server will be available. And also very deep integrations into your AI-driven IDEs like cursors are coming very quickly here too. So, Good Data has a commitment to this engineering-focused kind of API-first approach to analytics, and we're just carrying that forward into the AI era. Check it out at gooddata.com, and a big thank you to Good Data for sponsoring this season of the Super Data Brothers show. All right. So, Matt, there's 2 ways to evaluate these types of acquisitions. And I think us dorks jump straight to the technology. How does this technology fit in? And there's a really good conversation to have there. But oftentimes these acquisitions, especially when you're talking about 2 big companies like Salesforce and Informatica, are just as much about the business aspect. And so, where do you see that fitting in? Like, is this really about, is Informatica or is Salesforce trying to acquire a customer base, or are they trying to acquire a technology set, or is it a bit of both?
I would say it's a bit of both, and let's add acquihires in there as well, right? Like, I assume that Informatica, if you went to a Silicon Valley mixer, none of us would be impressed with like, oh, they're old and stodgy. But in reality, they have a lot of people who know things about data and know how to integrate with databases, all things that they may be very interested in. So let's talk about the business aspect. I mean, again, I'd be very curious to hear what happened behind the scenes when Mark Benioff was like evaluating this whole thing. But I wonder if they talked to their sales org and said, how often do we see customers ingesting Salesforce data using Informatica? Is this something that our customers are using a lot? And hey, do we think when sales goes to talk to people, do they find out, because often sales knows about this stuff, do they find out that our prospects are using Informatica as well? In that case, like that's a pretty good matchup if we can make this deal work. In terms of technology, I think, and Tony Baer was talking a bit about this, but I think Informatica has made a lot of efforts to migrate a lot of their services to the cloud. And so they've undertaken a pretty big move on that in that regard. I know that a lot of their customers have not made that move yet, but again, Salesforce may look at that and say, well, we could get into this company. They have they have an on-prem product, but they also have a pretty good cloud-based product that's mature. And then we could maybe integrate that into a larger platform. And then again, the acqui-hire aspect, because there was a kind of a chat on LinkedIn about, are they trying to become a data warehouse company? And and Malcolm, Malcolm Hawker talked about this a bit, that Salesforce has been pushing for years, the idea that you could store more data in Salesforce and kind of treat it as a data warehouse, which I can tell you as a consultant, we saw that frequently. I thought it was a terrible idea. I would always say that, but they may be saying, hey, why don't we make this actually work? Like, why don't we build a real data warehouse? And they may be thinking, well, maybe we can get Informatica and then use some off-the-shelf tools like Spark to make this happen so that we're not having to build a database from scratch, because there are frankly lots of open source nice options for columnar databases and columnar query engines. And you can potentially just use off-the-shelf object storage and combine that. And there you go. You have a data warehouse.
Yeah. I mean, that would be like that's one possible future, is that at Dreamforce next year, they're announcing the Salesforce version of Iceberg, right?
Yeah.
I mean, is that something we could see? Like, yeah, we could see that, because that's the piece that Informatica is missing. If the theory is, Salesforce is missing rather. If the theory is they want to build their own data stack in the same way that Microsoft has their own data stack and Google has their own data stack. Well, they don't have a data warehouse, right?
Yeah.
That's the piece they're missing. And I don't know. I tried to do some research. Maybe do you know what database Informatica is actually running? Or I keep saying Salesforce. Like, what are they actually running on?
That is a good question. I have no idea. I'd have to dig into that.
Like, my first thought would be, okay, it's either some flavor of Postgres, or like, is it
SQL Server or something?
Is it Oracle because of that relationship, right?
Yeah,
like,
that would make a lot of sense.
But that's the piece they're missing. And if you read the press release materials, it's all about AI, of course.
Right. It always is, right? These days.
Do you think there is any AI component of this, that Informatica has something that will be to Salesforce's advantage when it comes to moving more into the AI era?
So this is what I would say. I would say if they could build a better data warehouse system, and so maybe they use off-the-shelf stuff, could even be, DuckDB, like, oh, it's open source. Yes, MotherDuck is doing that, but maybe we can integrate that into our platform. And they combine that with data movement with Informatica. And they're kind of looking at their whole agent force thing and saying, well, once we have those pieces, we can then start analyzing that data warehouse data. And that's where our AI product gets very, very interesting. We can start doing text to SQL, which incidentally is still hard, but a lot of companies are doing that, and start trying to derive insights from the company data that also can feed back into our sales product. And, we can display those with Tableau maybe, and we can maybe combine that with mining Slack, and all these pieces together could be very interesting.
Yeah. There's a couple responses here. Tom says that he thinks it's Postgres, but then Roger Nixon says SQL Server and others. So it's
and I asked ChatGPT and it said Oracle. So
Oracle, right?
Okay. So we have we've got the bingo card filled out here.
It could be that there are different components to use each of those things. I don't know, but
but it does. It highlights an interesting reality, which again goes back to what we were saying earlier about, what it's not ClickHouse and it's not DuckDB. It's all of these these long-lived bedrock database technologies that people in the tech bro community think are lame. but that actually run the vast majority of the world's business.
Yeah.
And that is also Informatica. Like that's how that's Informatica. It fits that description as well.
Yeah. Well, the thing to remember with all these hot database technologies, let's talk about MongoDB. And I wouldn't say Mongo is hot these days. I mean, it's doing just fine, but it's not like the cool new kid on the block anymore.
Yeah.
But when it was the cool new kid on the block, it caused a lot of problems for companies that used it because it was so new that they misconfigured it. In so many cases, they weren't configuring it for consistency. And so I think there's more than one company that really, really got burned on that, including maybe a crypto company where they essentially went bankrupt because people using it were able to attack it by like double drawing accounts and such. And enterprises don't want that. They don't want to have to think about how do I configure this correctly for consistency. They just know that it's SQL Server or Informatica or even Postgres is so mature at this point that everyone knows how to use it. And there's documentation for everything, right?
Yeah. In fact, Eric and I made that exact mistake.
Yes, we
in
did.
like 2017 when we were working together at a consulting firm and we were building out this little analytics for your analytics application. This would be data observability before anybody coined the term.
Yeah.
And of course, it totally failed, right? Consulting firms can't build software in almost all situations. Occasionally, one succeeds, like Fishtown, but usually it doesn't work, and it didn't work for us. But even us, we're data warehouse and BI guys,
right?
And we got caught up in the Mongo thing.
We use MongoDB.
We built this Mongo backend for
an analytics tool. It's like MongoDB is not a good backend for analytics engine.
It sucked.
It sucked.
But it's easy to get caught up in the hype of that thing. Now, Kevin, thank you again, Kevin. Keep the insights coming. I think you're our resident Informatica expert on this live stream. Maybe we should invite you on.
Probably, I'll watch that show.
Yeah.
Do you have like guests jump on live in the show?
We could. I don't know, Kevin. What are you doing right now? You want to jump on and join the call? I can send you the link on LinkedIn. So Kevin says many people still view Informatica as just an old-fashioned ETL tool, and that's how we've been talking about it.
Right.
But the company has expanded into iPaaS, data quality, data governance. Earlier this month at Informatica World, they also introduced AI agents, highlighting their push into AI. Hopefully the merger will help improve their public perception.
Yeah.
And that is an important thing to bring up. I mean, everybody's going to focus on the bedrock of Informatica's business is ETL, right?
Yeah.
But they really do have a portfolio of product capabilities that extend into things like data catalog, data governance, data discoverability, that none of which Salesforce has. Right. And if Salesforce had acquired Fivetran, they would maybe get what's considered a sexier data movement tool,
right?
But they would not get all of this other stuff. They would have to also go out and buy Atlin and who knows who else. And the total acquisition cost of the 7 tools, the 7 hot startups that equal one Informatica would probably be much higher.
Right. And again, I'll go back to what I said earlier about distressed companies. You bring them into a larger umbrella, they have more resources. And I want to make a comparison to the way that banking works. So we saw Silicon Valley Bank get wiped out because of a bank run. And it turns out that on paper, they were perfectly solvent. It's just they couldn't handle the cash support. And so often in the banking world, what happens in that case is they get acquired by a larger bank that has more resources, and then they're just fine. And the parallel here is that maybe by having more cash resources, Informatica has a vision for a larger platform development where they can basically go to Salesforce in the acquisition talks and say, hey, these are things that we want to do that would make us a much bigger platform, including maybe data warehousing, but we do not have the money. Do you have the money? What if we partnered up? What could we do together that we can't do alone?
Yeah. And that I think that represents a really, I don't know about best case, but really good case scenario for this acquisition.
And that's fair. Yeah.
Let's talk about what makes for a good acquisition.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to ask. So you talk about, I mean, I think it is true that a lot of acquisitions fail, but what are our criteria for success? When do we think an acquisition has been successful? Because a lot of times the success is in the eye of the beholder, right? Like, what are your criteria?
Yeah, well, it's interesting from the tech bro perspective. You tend to look back on them and you judge the success of the acquisition by the acquired tools, market presence, and momentum at the present time.
Right.
So you talk about, for Eric and I, the most classic example is the IBM acquisition of Cognos.
Right.
And it's easy to look back on it now that Cognos has really stagnated and lost its market leading position. that you would say, oh, what a failed acquisition. But IBM bought Cognos in 2008.
Right.
And the amount of, it doesn't really matter how popular it is with the tech bros. What matters is the effect on the cash flows and balance sheets of IBM ultimately.
Right.
And I would say, even if culturally or the perception of that acquisition is, oh, it didn't go well, I would be shocked if IBM didn't make a good multiple on that acquisition, both in the immediate, financial advantages that they got from acquiring Cognos, and also from the knock-on effects where suddenly they had access to a customer base.
Yeah.
Cognos was in a ton of businesses where IBM did not have a foothold.
Exactly. Yeah. And it may have come down to IBM's sales team identifying all these businesses. They may have had kind of inside intelligence to say, we know that they're in these businesses and we would really like to be in these, like, so many enterprises. If we acquire them, we have a good shot at getting a foot in the door there, and we can offer them a Cognos renewal and maybe, another generation of improvements before things go downhill. And we'll offer them some other stuff in our portfolio at that point too, as part of the contract. And then voila, they're
and that was for sure the strategy. As someone who worked at an IBM partner, we did a lot of business going into people who their only IBM product was Cognos, and then saying, hey, here's some Watson stuff. Here's the data science tooling that IBM built. I can think of one situation where I think we did a $1 million plus sale of like the data science stack that IBM offers to a company who the only IBM product they had was Cognos. And that, so I guess what I'm getting at is, like, ultimately that's what will determine whether this is a successful acquisition or not. And it's not going to be, hey, what do tech bros think of Informatica in 2035?
Yeah. And then let's go back to the Oracle acquisition of Sun. And I, again, mentioned this the other day, but I always thought that was a failed acquisition because the Spark processors disappeared. Solaris disappeared. Like, all of the Sun servers disappeared. But Oracle, when they made that acquisition, first of all, they got Sun really cheap. And second, they knew that a lot of their customers were running on Sun hardware. So that was the first goal. Like, okay, get the Sun hardware so that we can just directly have that as part of our portfolio. Well, that became Exadata. Like, they did not have a hardware product before that. And now they have something called Oracle on, they have like Oracle at Google Cloud. And basically what that means is they put Oracle servers, that hardware, inside of Google's cloud, and it directly integrates with these modern tools. And so that all starts with that Sun acquisition 15 years ago, plus a bunch of other stuff. Like, they got a bunch of bits and pieces. And yes, a lot of the brands are gone and a lot of the people have moved on or retired, but like, it really got them into entirely new lines of business. It got them into Java, all these things that they otherwise would not have.
Right. Yeah. And that's the perfect example, right? Yeah. Like, you would look back on it and say, oh, bad acquisition because the brands disappeared.
Right.
But that's not what these acquisitions are ultimately judged on, is does the brand still exist?
Yeah.
It's about the total growth of the business and the access to new markets that you wouldn't have had otherwise without the acquisition. And ultimately that's how we're going to judge this acquisition too.
Right.
We may find that Salesforce doesn't build their own data stack. Maybe, maybe this Tableau Informatica kind of pairing doesn't turn into, oh, now Salesforce is a major player in the data space, but it could open up markets that we don't see, revenue streams that we don't see. And ultimately, it was very successful.
I mean, even being a minor player in the data space would be a big success, right? Because they paid, what, $8 billion for Informatica. Like, if that gets you to be a minor player and you're expanding that contract footprint, that could be a pretty good deal for them.
Yeah. And it kind of brings up, Kevin asks, what's our take on Salesforce acquiring Tableau?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, do you want who wants to give the
go
first?
I've anybody who watches this show knows my opinion of this one. So let's see what you say.
Yeah, I mean, I think, to be frank, Tableau is already kind of a stagnating product. I haven't seen that it's really improved that much, but at the same time, by these criteria, if you expand your customer base, then maybe it's not such a bad thing. Because what I do know about Tableau is that, in spite of the fact that the analytics engine, the visualizations are good, the analytics engine hasn't really improved that much, but the customers are very, very loyal to it. what I've seen in general. And so it's like, well, loyal customers, get them into our tent, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the Tableau secret sauce.
Yeah,
to me was the community that company was able to build
Yeah.
up around
Yep.
itself. It's almost like the 2015 version of DBT in a way. Like DBT people are crazy for DBT, I find.
Yeah.
And if you go back to a decade ago, Tableau people, it had a similar energy. It was like the average Tableau user was younger than your normal data analyst or BI person.
Mhm.
They were more dynamic. It was more diverse. They had more energy. And that's a whole cohort of people. You talk about like the cultural aspect of technology.
Right.
I mean, that was their whole career, and it's like they grew up with that tool. You might even look at it and say, when I started this tool, I was 25, and now I'm 35, and I have a wife and kids, and whatever. And like, I'm still a Tableau person.
Yeah.
But I will say, I think Salesforce, and this is not uncommon, is doing a really good job of crushing that spirit.
Yeah.
And
Actually, when this first happened, we created a clip that's relevant. I'm going to play it right now.
Okay, perfect.
Speaking of crushing the spirit of Tableau developers, let's do it.
You're horrible. You're an irredeemable monster.
Oh, what took you so long, idiot?
and there you have it. I think that was from the first or second episode of the Super Data
I
Brothers
think our
show.
first episode. I think our first one was an interview. Then our first real episode was, "Is Tableau dead?"
Yeah.
The
acquisition.
So what is the status of Tableau now from your perspective? Because like I see it, I've seen it in clients and things, but I don't have a good sense of like where the community is at or the sales.
I think that I mean, my read on it is that it's entered a decline phase. It's like the innovation seems to have slowed. I will tell you, at Good Data, the number one tool that people come to us looking to leave now is Tableau.
Interesting.
And I hear a lot of frustrations anecdotally from Tableau users. A lot of it stems around three things. The first one is the good vibes are gone. And Tableau ran on good vibes. It really did. And then the second one is stagnating innovation. And then the third complaint tends to be what innovation there is seems really more aligned with the needs of Salesforce than the needs of the Tableau community.
But that might be just fine from Mark Benioff's perspective. It was like, well, we're basically just going to turn Tableau into an extension of Salesforce so that salespeople can visualize their data. And maybe that's the goal. I don't know.
Right.
But it is hard for that community that really love that tool. It
is. And I think that's, again, like Tableau people, I predict already, if they don't already view this, what a failed acquisition. And it's from that perspective of a user who remembers the good times when the product was evolving quickly and it had this wonderful community around it. And it's just really hard to maintain that when you become part of a tech giant. And that be that as it may, the acquisition could still wind up being an incredible success for Salesforce, even if the perception is, they ran Tableau into the ground.
Well, it's like, think about the Apple Next acquisition. If you use that same criteria, those same criteria there, what do you see? Well, Apple came in, they bought Next, and they shut down Next Step and Next Computer. All of it's gone, right? But it's like, but they got a new operating system out of it. And that's what the iPhone runs on. That's what the iPad runs on. That's what the Mac runs on. So, I'm sure there were people in the Next community at the time who were like, this is awful. I don't want to go to Apple. They're this gigantic company that's kind of stodgy at this point, and I don't want to move to a Mac. And they're not entirely wrong, right? That thing they loved is gone, and yet it created something new. So,
and something more valuable than that thing they loved could have ever reasonably been.
Right, because it was headed toward bankruptcy basically at that point.
Right.
It wasn't going to survive.
And I think Tableau, probably that acquisition happened at the perfect time if you were a Tableau shareholder or a Tableau executive, as far as what you were able to cash out. I do think kind of the reality is that the momentum was slowing, but it hadn't become clear enough that there was any sort of discount to be had on acquiring Tableau. Versus with Informatica, I think like the amount Informatica could have been acquired for, I could probably peaked a long time ago.
Yeah.
At its maximum value at acquisition. And so, if I were a Tableau shareholder, I probably would be, the counterfactual of Tableau's still an independent company. I think the average Tableau user would be happier, but the average Tableau shareholder is probably glad it's not.
Yeah. And again, you always have to ask, well, would this company have even survived, or would they survive another 5 years from now? It's not, sometimes it's unclear because the product doesn't grow enough and you stop gaining market share and footprint. And then basically Power BI comes in and eats your lunch because Microsoft has contracts with everyone, and they just come in and say, oh, you already bought Power BI. Why are you renewing your Tableau license? Let's just retrain. We'll throw in some training on Power BI. Let's move all your Tableau people over.
And that's 100% what they're doing. Power BI, I give Microsoft a lot of credit. It's a good product, but their marketing and sales around that product and their market power is really what has enabled Power BI to move into this commanding position in the BI space. They're really, I think they're trying to do to BI with Power BI what they did to word processors with Word. There may be a few little alternatives, but in reality, anybody at any company of any size is just using Power BI.
Let me ask this. Let's talk about the regulatory aspects of this, because one of the things that kind of annoys me about the regulatory regime that we have around the tech industry is that right now we're going through the courts with Google to say you're a monopoly, you're too big, we need to tear you apart. And yet we allowed all these acquisitions for Google to get that big. And so, if I'm a regulator, should I allow this to happen, or should I say, you're getting a little too big here, your market power is too large, we're concerned about what this is going to do to competition?
I would say, it does. Also, you're right. And it feels like they're picking on Google a little bit. Like the exact same argument could apply to almost any of the tech behemoths.
Apple
all of them.
Gigantic company. Yeah.
Right. You could break all of them apart. And, I was watching listening to a podcast, and they made an interesting point. The host, it's the Scott Galloway podcast. I don't know if you're familiar with him. But his Prof G on Markets podcast is pretty interesting to me. And he was talking about why you should buy Google. And one of the reasons he gave to buy Google stock right now, he was talking about forward-looking PE and whatever. But he also said you should buy Google and be cheering for a breakup. Yeah. Because the history of breakups is that shareholders win. Because now you're going to have shares in the world's leading online advertising platform and YouTube, which would be an independent company, and this, AI firm, which would be an independent company. Now you have shares in 3 market leaders instead of 1.
Yeah. So let me give you a historical example of this. It's going way back, but basically once upon a time, if you go far enough back in history, before Boeing was a terrible company, but before also they were this huge successful behemoth that dominated jetliners, they actually had an engines division, piston engines back in the day, which I think was a United Technology or Pratt & Whitney. They had an airline, which was United Airlines, and they had an aircraft manufacturer. And they developed one of the really first successful commercial passenger aircraft called the Boeing 247. And so I think it was TWA that came to them and said, hey, we want to order this. This looks like a great product. And Boeing said, oh, we're not selling it. We're just going to give it to United. You can't have it. And so TWA went to Douglas Aircraft, which developed the whole very successful series of Douglas aircraft. And Boeing was basically knocked out of the market. And then eventually Boeing was broken up. All those components were split apart, United Airlines, and then United Technologies took the engine division, and then Boeing Aircraft. And then they developed the Boeing 707 later and completely crushed that market. And so, I think there's a lot of precedent here to say, if you break those components apart so they can compete, sometimes they do much, much better than if they don't have a strong motivation to compete because they're just too big.
Yeah, exactly. And you see a similar thing in telecom, right? With breaking up Bell, right? And then that turns into the regional companies, and they eventually turn into what we have today. A lot of them disappeared, but you'd be much better off with your stock that eventually became whatever, Verizon, or than if we hadn't done that. All
Are
right.
you are you old enough to have like one of those old AT? Did you grow up with one of those old AT&T phones in your house, like those super heavy, like solid? I think they were
Yeah.
considered. Were they considered like almost like a Bauhaus design or something like that? They're
Yes.
considered a design classic, but they're like super stodgy and heavy. Like you could kill someone with one of those phones very
Right.
easily.
Yeah. I do remember that.
That was a classic example of like, we're AT&T. Yeah, it's a cool looking design. It's kind of stodgy, but we don't care. We'll just take what you give us.
Exactly. Exactly. All right. Well, we're going to let's wrap up our discussion of the Informatica acquisition there, because I want to move on to this demo of this Quesma charts tool. It's a neat little tool. I'm excited to share with everybody. So, what last thoughts on the Informatica acquisition? I won't ask you to make a prediction because it's impossible, but just final thoughts on it. What should people be looking for going forward when it comes to evaluating this?
I'm just going to be I'm just curious about the strategic aspects. It's not even evaluating it. It's like, which path are they trying to take? Or do they just want to turn it into another Tableau where it just kind of gets ingested and they get more customers off of it, and maybe it becomes part of Salesforce to some extent? Or are they really going hard after the data warehousing market where they build something object storage based using Spark or something, and now they have a whole new line of business? I'll just be very curious to see how that part goes.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Cool. So with that said, we're going to switch over. I was at Data Council this year, and one of the things you go to Data Council for is to see all these kind of crazy new startups. A lot of them you may never hear from again, but sometimes they turn into really big market leading and market defining tools. And there was this Quesma charts tool. I think a lot of our audience is in BI and analytics, data analysts, and they're doing some interesting things with when it comes to AI and visualization. And so I wanted to share that with everybody here. So let me just share my screen. Of course, I got to get the right screen.
Mm-hmm.
Here we go. All right, there we go. And I will just whoop. Whoa, man. All right. So this is a pretty simple tool. What it is right now, I would say, is more a proof of concept than anything. You can see here, like they have, for example, they have these, like I've used 28 of 500 credits, but I can't seem to see anywhere to buy credits. I don't know what they're measuring. That's kind of the stage we're at here.
Okay.
But when you log into this, it's very straightforward. So you can upload data sets, and then you can use AI to visualize those data sets. We'll go ahead and just use their Mag7 CSV data set to start this out. And what I think is really interesting about this is both the simplicity and the fact that it uses multiple models and allows you to choose the visualization you like the most from the relevant model. So it's a natural language query. There's no drag and drop anything in this. You can edit the charts, but you can't do it via drag and drop interface. I'll show you how you can do it. When you come in here, it gives you, it's very basic, like project management. You can rename the project, but there's no like folders. There's nothing like that, right? This is very bare bones. But what you can do, and I'll just choose one of these suggestions they have, like compare closing price trends for each ticker over time. All right, let's start there and ask it to build a chart. And you'll see that it chooses 4 of the different models to use to render the chart.
Interesting.
So we're looking at GPT 4.1, Claude Sonnet 4.0, 04 Mini, and DeepSeek R1. And I find it's not always the same models. Right now, you don't have control over which models it chooses. Earlier today when I was using this, instead of Claude here, we had one of Google's models for.
I see what you're saying. So it just chooses, it selects 4 models for you, and you get what you get. Okay.
And you get what you get, right? Okay. So and it does everything here. So right, it's giving us the visualization, it's choosing the axes labels, it's choosing the chart and putting a description on it. The model is generating 100% of the visualization, right? And then you can go ahead and do a couple things with these. So the first one is if you want to say, okay, that's cool, but like I want a second iteration, you can hit this improve button. And what it will do is it comes up with this graded improvement where it asks the model like their default improvement, a subtle improvement, a strong improvement, and a complete rethink of the visualization.
Okay. So it probably just sends that language to the prompt.
Exactly.
Brainstorm subtle improvements. Brainstorm strongly. Rethink your approach and then recreate the chart. It's just sending those prompts to the.
And is it sending the chart itself as an image to the model, where these models have an image capability? Is that?
That's why. So there's no way to crack it open and look inside, right? I would like, but you can also keep track of your iterations, right?
Yeah.
So here was my initial, 4 shots there, and then you can see it really converged on a color palette across these 3, and then it shows this area chart as opposed to a line chart for the like rethink this. Now, what I can do here is if I click more, it will take me into the visualization itself, and here's where I can edit it. And the way you edit it is actually by editing the code. So you have the code for the visualization here. And if you want to make changes to it, you can edit the code and then click generate. Okay. And it will, it will change that chart here.
That's what it's sending to the model then.
Right.
It's sending that.
And so the flow here is kind of like you put in a prompt, it generates these 4, it generates these, and then you can, say you want to manually edit it, you go in and manually edit it, and then you come back here, and then maybe you click the improve button on your manual edit to send your manual edit back to the models to see what they can do with it now that you've tweaked it to be more like what you need in order to get a result out of it.
Got it.
So
hold on a second. So you were saying you can do an improve on top of your manual edits. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah. If you manually edit it, then you can come in here and click the improve button, and it will
take that feedback in another cycle.
Exactly. Okay. You can also provide feedback right here, right? So I can say, let me just put in something more complicated here, right? So what this reads is make a repeater chart of monthly high and low close price for each of the stocks where the data is represented by a bar that spans the vertical length of the high and low close price for that month. So it's kind of a little bit of gobbledygook, but I kind of can picture what this might look like in my head, and let's see what it does. Now, one of the things, like any of these non-deterministic tools, I did this earlier today, and I know what it did earlier, but is it going to do the same thing? I don't know. So we'll see what it comes. So, right, it got the repeater chart part right. So it's split each one out into its own micro chart. And then if you look at it, it is attempting to, it looks like right here, you can see it's a line chart made of little bars, which is essentially is pretty much what I asked for.
Yeah. It's funny. This looks like something you would have seen in the Wall Street Journal in the 90s.
Right. Yeah, it really does. Yeah.
What if you just tell it, create a chart in the style of the Wall Street Journal in the 90s or something?
We'll get to that.
Okay.
We'll get to that. So where that comes in is it's got these styles, right? So like, give me the style of the Economist.
Oh, okay. So
did I see like a Ghibli style?
There's a Ghibli style. Yeah.
Oh no.
Or Ghibli. That's one of those.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce
it. Here it's just gonna rebuild those charts in the style of the Economist, and let's see what it comes up with. And then the last thing I'll share is right. So here's
that's just the background, kind of platinum background, and everything is there.
Yep. And then you can actually manage the yourself. So I'll show you. I created this style called Balls Out. And the description of Balls Out is extreme wackiness, emojis, colors, soul of Sherbert, Lisa Frank, unicorn.
Let's check it out.
So now if we go back into the project and we say, okay, apply Balls Out, and tell it apply new style, chart that, it will apply the Balls Out style to the charts. And it comes back with some pretty interesting interesting interpretations of that instruction set.
I'm looking forward to seeing
So-
what this does.
Yeah. It was, give it a second to come back. So you can see here, right, that it's taken the spirit of what I provided to it to the next level. So like Claude has come back with this magical stock unicorn rainbow adventure.
Tech stocks galloping through server.
Yes. And look at the axis labels, right? Time magic and stock price sparkles
Log scale.
are the axis labels. And then it says here, made with maximum wackiness and unicorn power. And so it can really you can really apply, get very creative. Like let's say, can you make a similar chart, but use emoji to display the data? Let's just see what it comes up with here. And so, I think this is a really interesting example of the application of AI to the kind of the front end. It accidentally went back to default style. Let's go back to balls out style and chart it again. So this is an interesting application of LLMs to the visualization layer.
Yeah.
Is this? I don't even know if you wanted to buy this, how you could right now. Like I said, it's keeping track of the credits I've used, but like there's nowhere in here where I can acquire more credits. In fact, even today, this number of credits, an hour ago, this said out of 100, and now it says out of 500. So I don't even know what's really going on here.
Maybe they knew you were doing this demo, so
maybe they did.
Yeah,
I tagged them on
they-
LinkedIn. So
yeah. Because Cesare, like I looked at his LinkedIn. It's like, oh, he's from Quizma. So.
oh, is he from Quizma? Maybe they gave me more credits because they didn't want me to run.
yeah.
Okay.
Well,
This
that's
is like Gmail in the early days where you get so many invites, and then they increase over
Yeah.
time or something. Yeah. So here's my next question. When I see this, have you run into any situations where it generates something misleading? Because that is always the problem with LLMs, right? Like they're great when they produce good answers, or even answers where you can tell that they're not giving you what you want. Like, okay, that's not a good answer. But they're bad when they mislead you and confuse you, cause you to make bad decisions.
I haven't run into that yet. So one of the things that I think is helping to rein that in is that it's not responding with text. Right. It's just generating the visualization.
Yeah.
And that's, at Good Data, we do that too. Like we lean into, we will respond with a visualization rather than letting the AI describe to you, what it is you're looking at. I haven't really hammered this hard enough too. Like I would imagine I could, if I work with it enough in a real world situation, I could start to identify situations where it's doing that.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen that yet.
Looks like Claude returned bad code.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. What happens when the code is bad? Because that happens pretty frequently.
Error transform date works with objects of class data only. Yeah, because I think this is like an R chart using
Okay.
GG plot.
Oh, I love that there are emojis in the code.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so the final thing you can do with this is you can favorite these, right? Like, Text Carnival, that's one of my favorites, right? And you do have this library of favorites that you can look at. And then you can share these. And these are like open sharing. So like you click the share button, you can see I can download a PNG of the chart, I can copy a link. They have these links for me to share on various social media platforms. And they have, their little description, like they describe, like this is your chart, it's your code, it's all charts are public and licensed under this licensing regime.
Okay.
And they tell you, right, don't upload any data that you're not comfortable sharing. So it's very straightforward. I do think it'd be interesting and useful for a data analyst, in situations where like you want to rapidly iterate through charts, you're trying to ideate about how the best way to display some data, and you have a request from a user or one of your customers where they just need something fast, right?
Yep.
And you just like, okay, how can I get them something that has the style they need that they want to use quickly? I think it's really great for that.
I'm giving a PowerPoint to the execs in 1 hour. I need something.
And like, right, help me iterate through this. I'm just going to upload the CSV and we're going to go. I'm really curious, and Cesare is from Quesma, so I'm curious. What's the next step for this? Right. This is clearly like an early stage project, and I would really like to know where they think they're going to take it.
Yeah.
But I would encourage everybody to check it out at least. These are the types of things you're going to have to get used to as a data analyst, is like interacting with systems more in this way, right? And how can I describe what I need to the AI system in order to get the output I want?
Right. But I will say this, one of the complaints we're seeing more and more is that people use tools like this or code generation, and then they can't do that next step of like, oh, where is the bug? And it's something very simple like a misnamed variable, or I want to tweak things slightly and they can't figure out how to actually modify the code.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where, if I'm starting my career now, or even, a later career like me, it's like, learn how to use this tool, but then learn how to actually modify the code, like learn to understand what's going on. And that is going to be your real strength as a professional.
Exactly. Right. You need to be able to click on the more button and then do something over here, and that will be the differentiator between you and the people who, they know how to describe what they want to the model, but then they can't, when it comes time to add that final layer of polish or fix the bug or apply the logic that the model doesn't know, that it doesn't have access to, you need to be able to do that. And you're not going to be able to do that. You need to learn how to actually write the code, write the SQL, that's one thing we do in Good Data is like when we build a visualization, we're rendering it using our charting engine, and then you can just send it to the drag and drop builder. So that you can like use the AI to ideate, get the framework of what you want, and then if you need to tweak it, you can manually tweak it via the drag and drop builder.
So you don't have to use code, but you're using this drag and drop tool instead.
You have three options with us. Like you can. So you're talking to the AI and you say, okay, I'm trying to visualize this. It'll build it for you, and then from there, you can edit the code, or you can use the drag and drop self-service builder.
Okay.
Like send it to the builder or whatever.
Yep, exactly.
Like in the normal BI workflow.
Yeah. So that is Quesma charts. Yeah, it's ggplot too. Yeah. So check it out.
Very cool.
It's quesma.com. I think it's something to look into if you're just play around with it. Because I think you're going to see more and more of this type of interaction at the front end of the data stack. And it's at the very least it'll be good practice. I'm very curious where it is they plan on taking this. What is their plan with it?
It looks like
probably acquisition. That's probably the hope.
Maybe.
It's a tech demo someone might be willing to spend some money on.
$1 billion acquisition. Salesforce is going to acquire them next week.
Exactly.
Tableau is going down the drain. We need something new.
We need something. This Quesma seems cool.
It'd be one of those 7 people companies where now the person with the smallest amount of equity has $45 million.
Right. They thought they got a really bad deal when they onboarded. Like, oh man, I have to do this job. But this is horrible.
All right. Well, listen, we're at the top of the hour there, folks. First of all, I want to thank Matt for joining us here. It's always great to have you here on the show. And for staying the full hour with us. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. I'm glad I did. This was a really cool demo.
Yeah.
Folks, if this is your first time tuning into the Super Data Brothers show, we are running season 3 through the month of June. And then we're going to take a little summer break and be back in September. You can catch us here every Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern. And you can also always watch the replay at youtube.com/c/Super Data Brothers. Every episode of the Super Data Brothers show is available there on demand. I think we're coming up on episode 60. So check us out there. Matt, where can people follow you?
LinkedIn. So my LinkedIn profile is Housley Matthew. It's actually backwards for the handle, just because I didn't get the other one. And then YouTube these days, It's About Data is the channel. So just at It's About Data with no punctuation or capitalization, you'll find me there. So that's my podcast that you were on actually with Tony Bear. So
it's a great show. Everybody should check it out. And if you want to check out Quesma charts, it's charts.quesma.com. Cesare shares with us there. Cool tool, Cesare. Hit me up in the LinkedIn DMs and let me know where you guys are headed with this thing.
Yeah, like how much do you want for it? Is $1 billion enough or whatever? What do you
Awesome. And before we go, of course, we have to do an end of show shout out to this season's sponsor, Good Data. Good Data is launching their AI analytics tool today. So go to gooddata.com and check it out. This is it's a combination of like a deep search for existing content with a content generation NLQ engine. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. Like if you ask a question and there's already a pre-authored piece of professional content that answers your question, we'll just surface that. And then we'll say, or, it will provide some iterative suggestions. If this pre-existing content doesn't meet your need, would you like us to do this, this, or this? And then we can gen new content as well within that NLQ session. And all that is made possible by our semantic layer. We kind of lucked out at Good Data. We had a really robust semantic layer. And then, Gen AI came around and the RAG architecture, and we were able to just slide right into that and use it to our advantage. And so that's really one of the things that sets Good Data apart. It's not just the power of the visualization engine and the query engine, but it's also kind of the structured and governed nature of what you're feeding into the AI. Everything, we have our own homegrown RAG architecture. Everything's built on our semantic layer. You can enrich your data model with semantics, with rich descriptions to help the AI understand how to use every metric, every attribute, every table to really give you an AI that's not going to get your CIO fired. Is really the goal there. So check it out at gooddata.com. We just launched today. So if you sign up for a trial, you will have access to this tool today. Very exciting times for Good Data. All right. I want to thank everybody for joining us today and sticking with us as we run a little over. As always, I am Ryan.
I am Eric.
And we are the Super Data Brothers. Take care, everybody.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. All right. End stream.